People always told me I was lucky. I heard it so often that the words began to sound like music, a familiar melody I hummed without thinking. You're so lucky, Hanjun. Your skin, your face, your family. And oh, that man of yours. You're so lucky. And I believed them. I believed every syllable of it because how could I not? I had a mother who pressed warm rice into my bowl every morning and tucked kisses behind my ear like small secrets. I had a father who called me his treasure in a voice that cracked with sincerity. I had a younger brother, Jay, who was loud and messy and annoying in the most wonderful way, who borrowed my clothes without asking and ate the last of my strawberry yogurt and grinned at me with those bright, shameless eyes like he had done absolutely nothing wrong. I loved him so fiercely it ached sometimes like pressing a bruise. And then there was Seo Min. Alpha Seo Min. Even thinking his name now, even after everything, fills my chest with a warmth that is also a wound. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a jaw that looked sculpted and eyes that were dark and impossibly soft whenever they landed on me. He was a businessman, sharp in a boardroom, razor-tongued in negotiations, but with me he was something else entirely. With me he was careful, deliberate, like I was something he did not want to break. He had proposed to me on the rooftop of a restaurant we had visited on our first date 2 years prior. The fairy lights were strung above us in loops. He had gotten down on one knee and said, and I remember this exactly, I will always remember this exactly, Hanjun, I have never wanted anything as much as I want to spend the rest of my life irritating you. I had laughed. I had cried. I had said yes before he even finished the sentence. We were planning a spring wedding. I had already chosen the flowers, white tulips and pale blush roses. Jay had complained that I was turning into a wedding drama character and spent 3 evenings helping me look at fabric samples anyway. Amma had cried when we showed her the venue. Appa had shaken Seo Min's hand for a long time, the way fathers do when they are trying to say things they do not have words for. 3 months before the wedding, Seo Min surprised me with a vacation. Just the two of us, he said, pressing the printed itinerary into my hands. Jeju Island. 3 days. No phones, no meetings, no Jay stealing your hoodies. I had laughed and folded the paper carefully like it was precious. Because it was. Those 3 days on Jeju were the most beautiful of my life. I remember the salt smell of the sea. I remember the way Seo Min wrapped his coat around my shoulders on the cliffside walkway because I had forgotten to bring one. I remember how he looked at me over dinner, that particular look, the one that said I cannot believe you are real and you are mine. I remember falling asleep against his shoulder in the rental car as we drove back to the airport. I remember the rain beginning to fall. I remember the sound of tires losing their grip on asphalt. And then, nothing. For 3 months, nothing. The first thing I was aware of was white. Ceiling tiles. The particular sterile white of hospital ceilings that I now know the way I know the lines of my own hands. It took me a long time to understand that I was awake. That my chest was moving. That the persistent beeping beside my ear was a machine tracking my heartbeat. My mouth was dry. My body felt like it belonged to someone else, heavy and distant and uncooperative. I blinked several times, slow and confused, and then I heard it. Hanjun, my mother's voice broke clean in half. Hanjun, baby, open your eyes. Open them. Look at Amma. She was crying before I could fully process her face. And then my father was there, and Jay, and all 3 of them were reaching for me at once, hands on my arms, my face, my hair, like they were checking that all the pieces were still there. Amma, I said, and my voice came out like gravel. Why are you crying? She laughed through her tears. Why am I crying? Why am I? She pressed my hand to her cheek. I've been sitting in this chair for 3 months and you ask me why I'm crying. 3 months. I stared at her. What? Jay's face did something strange. He looked away from me quickly, toward the window. My father's jaw tightened. A specific, concentrated kind of tightening. The kind I recognized from him, from childhood. The face he made when he was trying very hard not to let something terrible show. Something is wrong, I thought dimly. Something is very wrong. But I was so tired. My body pulled me back under before I could ask the question forming somewhere behind my sternum. They waited. They were patient. They were so carefully, painfully patient with me in those first weeks as I went through physiotherapy and relearned how to move my legs without them trembling. They visited every day. Amma brought me food from home because she said the hospital rice tasted like cardboard. Jay sat beside me and showed me funny videos on his phone and pretended everything was normal with a desperation I could feel vibrating beneath his skin. Seo Min did not come. I noticed. Of course I noticed. Every morning I looked at the door expecting him. Every evening I told myself maybe tomorrow. I asked about him once, carefully, casually, because something in my family's silences made me afraid of the answer, and my mother had simply smoothed my hair back from my forehead and said, "You focus on getting better. Okay, just focus on that." Which was not an answer. Which was terrifying. It took 2 more weeks. 2 weeks of therapy. 2 weeks of relearning how to be a person who lived in a body that had been broken and put back together. And then one evening, my father sat down in the chair beside my bed and he folded his hands between his knees and he looked at me with those eyes that had always been my North Star, and I already knew. Before he spoke a single word, I already knew. "Appa," I said. My voice was very small. "Where is Seo Min?" My father breathed in. He breathed out. "Han Jun." "Tell me." He told me. I heard the words. I processed them individually, each one like a stone dropped into still water. Accident. Impact. Critical. Did not survive. I did not cry immediately. I think my brain did not know what to do with the information. It filed it somewhere sideways in a drawer it could not open yet. I simply sat there, staring at the wall, while my father held both my hands in his and said my name over and over very softly, like a prayer. Jay came in at some point and climbed up onto the bed beside me and wrapped his arms around me from behind and pressed his face against the back of my neck, and we stayed like that for a long, long time. I still did not cry. It would take seeing the grave. They took me to the grave on a Thursday. Before we dive into this heartwarming, emotional, slow burn romance Omegaverse story, note, this is an original work of Milliflex channel. If seen in another channel that is not Milliflex, please report that channel for copyright and impersonation. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. I remember because Thursday was the day I had my morning physiotherapy, and Seo Min had always texted me on Thursday mornings to tell me good luck. One of those small habitual gestures that accumulate into a life, into our life, into the texture of what it meant to belong to someone. The cemetery was quiet. It was early autumn, the kind of morning where the air smells like cold earth and the light is thin and golden and heartbreaking. My parents walked behind me. Jay held my arm, not to support my weight, just to be there, warm and solid and real. I stood in front of the headstone and read his name, Seo Min. And the stone had a date on it, the day of our accident. The day I lost 3 months of my life and he lost all the rest of his. And something inside my chest that had been carefully, precariously balanced since my father's words in the hospital room finally, quietly collapsed. I fell to my knees. I did not plan to. My legs simply stopped working. And then I wept. I wept in a way I did not know I was capable of, with my whole body, great shaking sobs that tore out of me like something being uprooted. I pressed my hands flat against the cold stone and I said his name over and over, Seo Min, Seo Min, Seo Min, because if I kept saying it maybe he would hear me somewhere. Maybe sound could travel to wherever he was. Jay knelt beside me in the grass and did not tell me to stop crying. My parents stood behind us and my mother was weeping too, quietly, with her hand pressed over her mouth. We stayed for a very long time. When I finally stood up, my legs were numb and my face felt raw and scraped clean. Jay helped me to my feet. He did not say anything. He just walked beside me with our shoulders touching, the way he had done since we were children. The months that followed were a particular kind of gray. I went to therapy. I went religiously twice a week, sitting across from Dr. Yoon in her calm, plant-filled office and trying to explain the sensation of missing someone so completely that it felt like a phantom limb. Like reaching for something that was no longer there and feeling genuine shock every time your hand found only air. Dr. Yoon was patient with me. She had wire-rimmed glasses and spoke in a voice that never rose or fell dramatically, and sometimes that steadiness was the only thing that made her bearable. "You're not sleeping," she observed one afternoon. "I sleep," I told her. She tilted her head. "How much?" I looked at the fern on her windowsill. "Some." "Han Jun." She set down her pen. "What do you do at night? When you can't sleep?" And I told her. Because there was no point in hiding it. I told her that sometime around 2 months after the funeral, I had picked up my phone in the darkness of 3 a.m. and I had opened my conversation thread with Seo Min and I had begun to type. Not because I expected a response. I knew that he was gone. I was not delusional. I was simply someone with too many words and nowhere to put them, and the only person who had ever received all my words, every careless and precious one of them, was dead. So I sent them anyway. "Seo Min, it rained today. I thought of you because you always complained that Seoul rain was different from Jeju rain. I think you were right. I had strawberry yogurt for breakfast. Jay ate the last one again. Some things don't change. Amma made japchae tonight. She put extra mushrooms in because she knows I like them. I almost called you to tell you. I wore the blue sweater today. The one you said made my eyes look like a painting. I don't know if that's true, but I keep wearing it." Dr. Yoon listened to all of this without interrupting. "And how does it make you feel?" she asked. "Sending the messages?" I thought about it honestly. Like he's still somewhere. Like there's still a thread connecting us. I paused. "I know it's not healthy." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I think it's a form of continuing bonds, a way of maintaining connection that many people find helpful in grief. The key is whether it's keeping you in the world or pulling you out of it. She looked at me carefully. Is it keeping you present? Yes, I said, and I meant it. When I send him a message, it's like I'm narrating myself to someone who cares. And it helps me notice my day. Notice that I'm still living in it. She nodded slowly. Then for now, she said, keep writing? So I did. Seo-min, today I went back to work. Only part-time. Amma wanted me to wait another month, but I couldn't stay inside any longer. The office smelled the same. Park from accounting said welcome back and shook my hand for too long. I had ramen for dinner. The cheap convenience store kind. You would have been horrified. You always said my eating habits were a personal attack. I dreamed about Jeju again. I dream about it often. I never dream about the car. Just the 3 days before. I think that's a kindness. Jay got a promotion. He's pretending to be calm about it, but he called Amma 6 times to tell her. I'm proud of him even when he's annoying. Seo-min, it's been 8 months. Some days it's easier and some days it's not, and I've stopped trying to predict which kind of day it will be. I sent these messages the way some people write in journals. Faithfully. Carefully. Not every night, but often enough that it had become its own quiet ritual. Phone in hand, the city humming outside my window, me making small offerings of my daily life to a number that no longer belonged to anyone I knew. I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. If I had known, if I had even suspected, I might have stopped. I might have chosen silence instead of this strange continuation of my grief that had, without my knowledge, become something else entirely. A broadcast. A window into the most private geography of my heart. I did not know that Seo-min's number, after some administrative passage of time, had been reassigned. I did not know that every message I sent in the quiet dark of my apartment arrived, clear and delivered, to the phone of a man I had never met. I did not know that this man, known across Seoul in certain circles not for kindness but for ruthlessness, had read every single one. John Jungkook. I will say this, the name meant nothing to me then. It would come to mean everything. But I am getting ahead of myself. Because before names there was a pink shirt. Seo-min had bought it for me 6 months before he died. A pale blush pink, silk adjacent, with a subtle shimmer that he had said, with the particular confidence of a man who had studied me longer than I had studied myself, brings out the gold in your brown eyes. I had blushed when he said it and called him dramatic and worn the shirt 3 times in 2 weeks. After his death I could not touch it for almost a year. It hung in my closet like a memorial. I knew it was there. I worked around it when I reached for other clothes. I did not throw it away because throwing it away would have felt like an erasure, and I was not ready to erase anything. But one October evening, my colleague Kim Min-ji invited me to a charity gala hosted by one of Seoul's major cultural foundations. She phrased it as a work obligation, but her eyes said, Han-jun, please, it's been 11 months and you haven't been anywhere that requires you to wear proper shoes. She was not wrong. I stood in front of my closet for a long time. And then I took out the pink shirt. Before I left, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone. Seo-min, I'm going to that gala tonight. Kim Min-ji finally convinced me. I'm wearing the pink shirt, the one you picked out. The one you said brought out the colors of my eyes. I still don't know if you were right or just trying to flatter me. Maybe both. I think you would have liked this evening. You always liked a good event. You would have fixed my collar approximately 4 times and stolen a canopy off my plate and then denied it. I miss you. I'm going anyway. I sent the message, stood up, fixed my own collar in the mirror and went. The gala was held in one of those grand venues that existed to make people feel both important and temporary, high ceilings, chandeliers, the clink of glasses and the murmur of curated conversation. I stayed close to Min-ji for the first hour, accepted a glass of sparkling water, and tried to feel like a person who belonged in a room full of light. I did not expect to be found. I did not expect, in the crush of well-dressed people, to become suddenly and completely aware of being watched. It was not uncomfortable exactly. It was more precise than that. The way you feel sunlight shift and know without looking up that a cloud has moved. I turned, just slightly, just enough, and across the room, standing near the far column, was a man looking directly at me. He was, I have to be honest, strikingly, almost unfairly handsome. Dark hair, strong features, broad through the shoulders in a way that his well-cut suit only emphasized. There was something about his presence that was different from the other men in the room. They moved with the casual comfort of people who had been wealthy for generations. He stood the way someone stands who has decided, a long time ago, that the world will arrange itself around him. His eyes, when they met mine, were very dark and very still. And then, slowly, deliberately, he began walking toward me. My heart did something I had not felt in a long time. Not grief. Something else. Something I had almost forgotten I was capable of. He stopped in front of me. Up close he was even more, everything. His scent reached me before his words did, the deep cedar and dark amber of an alpha, clean and complex, and something in my omega instincts recognized it and went quiet in a way that was not fear. It was the opposite of fear. "Forgive me," he said, and his voice was low and unhurried, "for being direct. But you're the most striking person in this room and I find I've lost my patience for pretending otherwise." I blinked. "That's quite an opening." "I know." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Almost a smile. "Is it working?" Despite myself, despite everything, something loosened in my chest. "Ask me again in 10 minutes. His almost smile became real. We talked for 2 hours. I cannot fully explain what happened in that space of time, except to say that it felt, effortless is not the right word because there were moments of genuine careful navigation, of feeling my way through unfamiliar territory, but it felt natural. Like something that had been waiting to happen. He asked me questions and actually listened to my answers. He said things that made me laugh, real laughs, the kind that surprised me on the way out. He noticed when my glass was empty before I did. At some point the crowd around us stopped mattering entirely. His name, he told me, was Jungkook. Just Jungkook, offered simply, without the architectural scaffolding of title or business card that most men at events like this use to introduce themselves. "What do you do?" I asked. "Business," he said. Brief and complete. Then, tilting his head slightly, "What about you?" And so I told him about my work. About Minji dragging me here. About being a homebody who had been coaxed into civilization by the promise of good catering. He listened with his full attention and it was dizzying, that attention. I had forgotten what it felt like to be fully seen by someone. When the evening ended and I stepped out into the cool October air, I stood on the pavement for a moment and breathed. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. "I should have asked for your number before you left. Fortunately, I'm not someone who gives up easily." "Jungkook." I stared at it. Then I looked around, almost laughing, and typed back. "How did you get this number?" I asked the event coordinator. I may have been persuasive. That's either charming or alarming. Give it time. It'll be charming. I stood there in the night air with a ridiculous expression on my face and something warm pooling quietly in my chest that I did not yet have a name for. We began to see each other. Carefully at first. The way you approach something fragile that you are not sure will survive being touched. He took me to small restaurants where the lighting was low and the food was extraordinary. He walked beside me in the park near my apartment on weekday mornings when his schedule permitted and mine allowed. He learned that I preferred my coffee with too much milk. I learned that he took his black, that he had a habit of tilting his head when he was thinking, that he was quietly but intensely funny in a dry way that took some adjustment. He made space for my silences. That was the thing that undid me most, I think. Most people, when confronted with the quiet I sometimes fell into, the particular quality of absence that accompanied living with grief, would try to fill it. Would talk faster or change the subject or ask if I was alright with the hopeful urgency of someone who wanted the answer to be yes. Jungkook simply sat in it with me. Like silence was a place he had no problem occupying. My family noticed, of course. Jay noticed first. He noticed everything first, filed it under the category of things I will tease Hanjun about later, but his eyes when he looked at me had gone soft in a way that told me he was also genuinely glad. Amma asked once, carefully, if I was seeing someone, and when I said maybe, I don't know, she had simply touched my face and said, "Whatever makes you feel like yourself again, Hanjun." That's enough. Appa said nothing. Which, for him, was everything. I was falling. I tried not to. I tried the way you try to stop a tide, by noticing it, naming it, standing still and hoping it would pass around you. I reminded myself that Seo Min had not been gone a year. I reminded myself that I still sent messages to his old number. I reminded myself that love, when it returned after being destroyed, did not come back the same shape. It came back unfamiliar and disorienting and sometimes terrifying. But Jungkook was patient with all of my trying. And then came the evening he told me the truth. We were in his apartment. It was the first time I had been there, and it was exactly what I might have expected and nothing like what I expected simultaneously. Spacious. Dark furnished. The kind of space that felt inhabited in a considered way, where everything had been chosen deliberately. But there was a pair of worn slippers near the kitchen that made me smile, and a small succulent on the windowsill that looked slightly overcared for, like he watered it more than he should. We had eaten dinner. He had cooked, which had surprised me, and cooked well, which had surprised me further. Now we were sitting on opposite ends of his couch, mugs of tea between us, the city visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows in a wash of lights. He was quiet in a particular way. Not the comfortable silence I had come to recognize from him. This was something held. Something braced. "Jungkook," I said. "Whatever it is, just say it." He looked at me for a long moment. Something moved across his face, a kind of deliberate courage, the kind that cost something. I need to tell you something, he said. And I need you to hear all of it before you respond. Because if I stop in the middle I won't finish. My hands were very still around my mug. Okay. He breathed in. Do you remember when you first got my number, when you thought you were texting someone else? The bottom of my world dropped out quietly. I said nothing. I waited. There was a number, he said carefully, that you had been sending messages to. For about a year. Messages about your day. About coffee and rain and your brother eating your yogurt and a blue sweater and... He stopped. He looked directly at me. And a pink shirt. The mug in my hands was suddenly very heavy. That number, he continued, his voice even and unhurried even though his eyes were not, his eyes were everything, was mine. Seo Min's number had been reassigned. To me. I received every message you sent him. Silence. The city glittered outside the window, indifferent and continuous. I stopped. My voice had gone somewhere else. Every message. Every one. He did not look away. From the first. About the rain in Seoul being different from Jeju rain. I closed my eyes. He waited. I thought about all of it. Every 3 a.m. offering I had made to the quiet dark. Every small careful piece of my grief that I had sent into the void believing myself alone and unheard. I had strawberry yogurt. Jay is annoying. I dreamed about Jeju again. I wore the shirt you chose for me. Jungkook, I said very quietly. Why didn't you tell me? At the beginning? Because, he said, and his voice was different now, lower, something more exposed moving through it. At the beginning I didn't know who you were. And then I started to. And by the time I understood. He stopped. Ran a hand through his hair. By the time I understood what I was reading, what I was receiving, who you must be, I already... He stopped again. Then, I went to the gala, Hanjun. I went because of the message you sent that night. About the pink shirt. I needed to put a face to all those words. I opened my eyes. He was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on him before. Jungkook, who was always composed, always measured, who occupied every room like he had decided how it would go before he arrived. He looked, in this moment, genuinely uncertain. Genuinely afraid. I know, he said, that I should have told you sooner. I know that it was wrong to let it go on as long as it did. And if you want to leave, I will understand it. I will not. His jaw tightened briefly. I won't ask you to stay. The silence stretched between us. Inside my chest, something enormous was happening. I could feel it shifting and rearranging, the particular geological process of a truth landing and settling and becoming real. He had read everything. He had sat with my grief, alone, without me knowing. He had learned me the way you learn a person by reading their private correspondence. Not through any dishonesty of his own, but through the strange coincidence of a phone number and the relentless habit of a bereaved person who needed somewhere to put their words. He had come to the gala to see me. He had looked across a room and something in him had. Did it? I stopped. Tried again. When you read them. Did they? I could not finish the sentence. He finished it for me. They changed something in me, he said simply. Yes. I looked at him for a long time. This man who was, I knew now, someone with a gravity that could pull whole systems toward him. Someone who moved through the world with a force that most people spent their lives trying to stand clear of. And he was sitting across from me on a couch with a cooling cup of tea and an expression on his face like he was bracing for something terrible. You're scared? I said, half wondering. Something flickered in his eyes. He did not deny it. I've never had anything to lose before, he said. Not like this. I set my mug down, carefully. And then I crossed the small distance between us on the couch and I took his hand, his large, warm hand, in both of mine and I held it. He went very still. Jungkook, I said. I'm not leaving. His exhale was slow and controlled and I felt it anyway, the relief moving through him like a tide going out. His hand turned in mine and held back, carefully, like he was afraid of gripping too hard. There is more, he said. Things about me. About the kind of world I move in. It isn't clean, Hanjun. Or safe. Or... Tell me, I said. So he told me. About the empire he had built in the gray spaces of the city. About the things his name meant to people who knew it in certain rooms. About the danger that existed, peripheral and ever-present, in the life he led. He told me with the methodical care of someone who had decided that if he was going to do this, he would not do it with half-truths. I listened to all of it. When he was finished, the apartment was quiet. Are you afraid? He asked. I thought about it honestly. A little, I admitted. But, I looked at our joined hands. At his profile against the city lights. I've been more afraid than this. I've lived through more terrifying things than this. I looked up at him. And you've been reading my 3 a.m. messages for a year. You know every ordinary embarrassing piece of my life. I think that makes us even. Something happened on his face that I was not prepared for. He looked cracked open just slightly. A fracture in the composed facade, and through it I could see something I recognized. The person underneath. The person who watered his succulent too much and cooked good food and read grief messages from a stranger and felt something move in his chest and could not explain it or stop it. He reached up and very slowly brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. I will protect you, he said. It was not a promise made lightly. It came from somewhere deep and absolute in him. Whatever it costs, I will always protect you. I believed him. I leaned my head against his shoulder and he let me, and his arm came around me slowly, carefully, like he was still getting used to the idea that he was allowed. We stayed like that for a long time in the quiet, with the city below us and the whole improbable story of how we had found each other hanging in the air between us, strange and tender and entirely ours. The months that followed were, I will try to say this right, a different kind of gentle. Not the gentleness of early love, which is breathless and fragile. This was something more deliberate. We had both come to each other carrying things. I carried grief, the specific weight of loving someone and losing them before the story was finished. He carried the residue of a life built on self-sufficiency, on the practiced certainty that needing no one was a form of safety. We were careful with each other's wounds. And gradually, carefully, we were also less afraid of them. Jay met him first because Jay was inexorable and also because Jungkook had appeared in the background of a photo I had posted and Jay had sent me 17 question marks in a row at 11 p.m. and I had surrendered. They met for lunch. Jungkook was his contained, quietly imposing self. Jay looked at him for approximately 45 seconds and then turned to me with the expression of someone who has just solved an equation. He's terrifying, Jay said later, with the approving tone of someone for whom this was clearly a compliment. He's not, I began. Han-jun. I've literally never met anyone who can make a restaurant go quiet just by sitting down in it. He was fine. He was incredible. Jay pointed at me. Don't mess this up. My parents took more time. My mother was cautious in the way only mothers can be, watchful, saying little, observing everything. My father asked Jungkook careful questions over dinner at my parents' house, and Jungkook answered each of them with a directness that I could see my father respect even as he reserved his verdict. The verdict came later. My father, washing dishes beside me in the kitchen while the others talked in the living room, said quietly, "He looks at you the way someone looks at something they refuse to let go of." Pause. That's not nothing, Han-jun. No, I agreed. My throat was a little tight. It's not. There were moments that marked the progression of us as clearly as milestones. The evening I fell asleep on his couch and woke up to find a blanket over me and him working quietly at his desk, glancing over occasionally to check. I watched him through mostly closed eyes for a long moment before he noticed I was awake. The afternoon he showed up unannounced at my door when I had sent him a message simply saying bad day, don't ask, and stood in my doorway with takeout and said only, you don't have to talk. I just didn't want you to be alone. And he had sat beside me the entire evening and we had watched 2 episodes of a cooking show and he had not asked me anything and it was exactly what I had needed. The night, months in, when I cried. Not the spectacular grief crying of standing at a grave, but the quiet private kind. Sitting on my bathroom floor at midnight with tears running down my face for no reason I could name and every reason I already knew. He found me because he had been sleeping in the other room and had woken and seen the light. He sat down on the floor beside me without a word and gathered me against his chest and held me while I cried. His hand was in my hair. His chin rested on the top of my head. He did not try to stop the tears or explain them away. I miss him, I said eventually against his chest. I still miss him. I know, Jungkook said. Simple. True. No competition in it, no hurt. Just acknowledgement. I love you, I said. First time. It came out before I had decided to say it, wrenched out of me by the specific combination of grief and gratitude and realness that the moment contained. I love you and I still miss him and I don't know how those two things can be true at the same time but they both are and I... Hey. His arms tightened around me. They can both be true. Both of them. You don't have to choose. I pressed my face against his collar. How are you so certain about things? I'm not. Pause. I felt him exhale. About most things. But about you, about this, another pause longer. I'm certain about this, Han-jun. I have been since I read the message about the blue sweater and I realized that I was reading the most honest person I had ever encountered and I was never going to meet them. And then you did, I said. And then I did. I tilted my face up and he looked down at me in the dim light and he lowered his head slowly, giving me every opportunity to move and kissed me, gently, with enormous care, the way you handle something you understand the full value of. His hand cradled the back of my head. My fingers curled into his shirt. The kiss was not long. It was quiet and entire, and when we parted I could breathe again in a way I had not managed to since midnight. I love you too, he said. He said it the way he said everything that mattered. Simply, from the bottom of it, without decoration. I think I loved you before I knew your name. I would not say it was without difficulty. Jungkook's world pressed against ours, sometimes in ways that required courage I had to locate deliberately. There were men who looked at me with hard eyes at events where his name carried the full weight of what he was. There were evenings he came home late and said nothing, and I learned to read the particular set of his shoulders that meant not tonight, and to simply make tea and sit nearby until the night loosened its hold on him. There were moments of fear, genuine, specific fear, that I had to breathe through. But he had promised to protect me, and he did. Not in a way that erased my agency or wrapped me in cotton. He was not that kind of man, and I was not that kind of person. He protected me the way someone protects what they love when they are also someone who has the capability and the will to do it. He was meticulous about it. And it was, strangely, one of the most intimate expressions of love I had ever experienced, to be guarded that carefully by someone who was so entirely capable of the alternative. And his world, I discovered, was not only shadow. There was also extraordinary loyalty, the kind forged by fire and pressure, the kind that does not bend. The people around him were complicated, layered, human. Some of them came, over time, to like me. One of them, a quiet man named Namjoon who served as something like Jungkook's most trusted advisor, told me once, "I've known him for 12 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. I didn't think he was capable of it." "Of what?" I asked. Namjoon looked at me steadily. "Of being undone. He proposed to me on a Thursday. I did not know it was coming." He had not been unusual that morning, had made breakfast, had read through his messages at the kitchen counter with his habitual focused expression, had kissed me on the cheek before I left for work. He had texted me once in the afternoon to ask if I wanted dumplings for dinner. When I came home, the apartment was quiet. And then I went into the living room and he was there, standing in the middle of it, and on the table behind him were white tulips and pale blush roses. I stopped in the doorway. He had found out, at some point, I think from something I had mentioned once, quietly, about the wedding that had never happened, what flowers I had chosen. He looked at me with steady, dark eyes and said, "I have never been someone who was good at speeches, or at being soft, or at any of the things that are supposed to precede this." He paused. "But I have been someone who read every piece of you that you sent into the dark, and loved what I found there, and could not have stopped what happened to my heart even if I had tried." Another pause. "I'm not asking you to forget anyone. I'm asking you to let me be here for the rest of it, whatever it is." He held out the ring. I was already crying. I was across the room before I had decided to move. I took his face in my hands and pressed my forehead to his, and we stayed like that for a long moment, breathing each other in, and I said yes against his lips before the kiss even happened. He laughed, quietly, into my mouth, and I laughed too, and then the kiss happened properly, and it was nothing like our first quiet bathroom floor kiss. It was something complete. We were married in May. White tulips. Blush roses. The venue we had chosen together, the two of us, side by side on the couch with his laptop open and his shoulder warm against mine. Jay was insufferable and luminous in equal measure as my man of honor, adjusting my jacket collar approximately 4 times before the ceremony and then pretending he had not. Amma cried from the moment she saw me dressed and did not stop until well into the reception. Appa walked beside me, and at the moment we stopped, he leaned close and said into my ear, "Seo Min would want this for you." I know he would. Be happy, Hanjun. I held myself together. Just barely. Jungkook was waiting at the end of the aisle. He was wearing white. His hair was neat, his posture was its usual contained authority, and then he saw me and something in him went completely unguarded. Right there in front of everyone. He looked at me the way he had looked at me across a gala 2 years before, like something electric had just passed through him and rearranged his understanding of the world. I walked toward him and the whole rest of the room went soft and peripheral. When I reached him, he took my hand and leaned down and said very quietly, "Just for me, you wore the pink shirt on the night I found you. You're wearing white today. Both times you've taken my breath away." I managed not to cry until the vows. Just barely. Our twins came in the 2nd year of our marriage. 2 boys, small and impossibly perfect, with Jungkook's dark hair and, I maintain this and no one can tell me otherwise, my ears. We named them Sue and Min. The second name was Jungkook's suggestion, offered simply one evening with his eyes on me, steady and certain. I cried for a long time after he suggested it. Then I said yes. The day Sue and Min came home, my parents drove over with enough food to last 2 weeks, and Jay appeared at the door wearing an expression of terrified wonder and holding the largest stuffed rabbit I had ever seen. Jungkook's people, his complicated, layered, loyal people, sent flowers that filled every surface. Namjoon sent a card that read, "Congratulations. Now there are even more people he can't afford to lose. You've entirely undone whatever remained of his reputation for fearsomeness." Jungkook read it and laughed. A real, unguarded laugh. I had been collecting those for 2 years. I sat that evening in the nursery with one small boy in my arms and the other in Jungkook's, and the room was very quiet and full of the particular quality of light that comes at dusk in late spring, honey gold and soft-edged. Jungkook was looking down at the child he held with an expression I had never seen on him before and would never get tired of seeing. Absolutely undone. Unarmored. Himself. "Jungkook," I said softly. He looked up. "I want to tell you something," I said. "And I need you to hear all of it before you respond." He recognized his own words. Something moved through his expression. Warmth, the particular warmth he reserved for me and only me. "Okay. I spent a long time sending words into the dark," I said. Talking to someone I had lost because I didn't know how else to keep going. And what I didn't know, what I could never have known, was that the dark was listening. I looked at him. "You were listening. And everything I thought I was losing, I was actually sending toward you." Pause. "I don't think that's coincidence. I think that's the kind of thing that means something. That some thread of the universe decided I wasn't finished yet. That there was more." Jungkook's jaw was tight in the way it got when he was feeling something large and was managing it carefully. "You are everything I never thought I deserved," he said finally. "Everything I didn't know I needed until you sent me a message about strawberry yogurt at 3 in the morning." The corner of his mouth moved. "And I will love you for the rest of my life, Hanjun. All of it. Every ordinary morning. Every message. Every pink shirt." I shifted Sue carefully in my arms and stood and crossed the small distance between us, and I pressed my lips to his cheek, soft and lingering, and he turned his head and caught my mouth with his in the gentlest of kisses. Our children between us, the evening light around us, everything we had survived and everything we had built held in the quiet of this room. I'm lucky, I thought. Not in the shallow way people had said it when they looked at my face or my family or my first love. But in the deep way. The real way. The way that is not luck at all but something more deliberate. The way that means I have been through the dark and I have come out the other side, and what I found here, in this room, in this life, in this man who once read my grief and let it change him. This is not luck. This is grace. And somewhere in the soft May evening, I could have sworn I felt something settle. Some gentle finality, like a thread tied off neatly, like something that had been held in suspension for a long time finally, quietly released. "Thank you, Seo-min," I thought. "I found my way. And I am so happy."